Hi, this is Greg Smythe, and I want to welcome you to this week's episode of Uncharted Waters, the podcast brought to you by GlobalNl. The goal of the podcast is to share stories of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians doing interesting and amazing things, both at home in the province and around the world. This week's guest is Dr. Vianne Timmons, who has recently taken on the role as president of Memorial University of Newfoundland and Labrador. Dr. Timmons is a teacher by training. She has also done a wide range of research programs emphasizing family literacy and inclusive education. Prior to taking on her current role, she spent 11 years as president of the University of Regina. During the episode, we discuss her experience of growing up in Labrador and how it formed her, the biggest asset of the university, as well as its biggest challenges it faces, as well as why his community is so important to her. I really appreciated Dr. Timmons' positive outlook, despite the university facing some very tough problems. I hope you enjoy the episode, and we look forward to sharing more stories like this in the near future. I want to welcome you to this week's episode of Uncharted Waters, where we're interviewing the president of Memorial University of Newfoundland, Dr. Vianne Timmons. So thank you for joining me today. I'm calling in from San Carlos, California, and I'm assuming you're joining from, looks like your office at Memorial?
It is. I'm joining you from my office at Memorial University.
Great. Thanks for joining today. So I'll start off by maybe giving a brief introduction to GlobalNl, just so you have some context, and sometimes it's a good refresher for new listeners to the podcast. So maybe I'll start with why I started GlobalNl, at least my motivation, and then maybe describe what we're trying to do. So, I mean, really, the impetus for me was I did a career transition from the oil and gas industry in 2016 to the tech industry in Silicon Valley. And, you know, a big part of that was networking and meeting new people and meeting Newfoundlanders that were working in that industry, either in California or in Toronto and places like that. It was a big asset for me. I think the other thing, you know, tied into the university system, being in the U.S. for the past 8 years, you see really the power of really strong networks, and especially big alumni networks in the U.S. are incredible, and the affinity people feel for the university. So I did see, you know, a real need for that and a value that that we could be capturing more of. And I think that's why, you know, we've started to work with the Alumni Association at the university as well. And I think also I've been working for about 10 years, and it's a good time for me to start to give back in some hopefully meaningful way. So it really started with some initial, like trying to help some co-op students from the engineering school to get co-op jobs here in California and with different tech initiatives. And then we've kind of built on it from there. I think like what we're trying to do, and like conceptually anyways, is to build a conduit, we'll say, that kind of can flow both directions. So for expats living abroad, they can really give back to the community or to Newfoundland and stay connected, or vice versa. If, you know, there's students or, you know, young professionals that are living in the province that want to connect globally to expertise or people that we can be a facilitator in that. And then I think for the last year or maybe even 2 years, we've been working with Lynn and Andrea at the Alumni Association to build this partnership, which, you know, we've been doing mostly behind the scenes, but we'll go more public in the coming weeks and months. And so we're really excited about that. So that was kind of what kicked off this discussion. But any questions on that, or I can jump into some questions on your profile.
Well, I just think it's fabulous that you're doing this. And I know growing up in Newfoundland, the connection to place is really, really important. And that you're facilitating that for people around the world is wonderful.
Yeah, and that was another thing. You know, you meet people that even have been away for 20 or 30 years, and they still have it. We met with a guy, Rob Kosh's, a friend of ours that works here, and, you know, he had us over for dinner one night, and he had his MUN Engineering leather jacket and his yearbook, and he had Newfoundland music on, you know, and like that, he has been gone from Newfoundland for 20 years or something like that, but he still feels that connection, you know, and there's a lot of people that are like that. And I think also a lot of people want to give back. They just don't know how. You know, there's not really a method for doing it.
Well, that's almost in Newfoundlanders' DNA. You know, you look after each other, you give back. You really are a community.
Yeah, exactly. So I was going to start with a little bit of your background. From my understanding, you grew up in Labrador. Could you talk about, you know, in brief, how that formed you and kind of how, I guess you're kind of coming home in a way. I know you spent a long portion of time away from home. away from Newfoundland. I wonder if you could tell us about, I guess, how growing up in Labrador you think shaped you.
Well, I spent all of sort of my significant years in Labrador, all my childhood, teenage years. I grew up in a family of 6. There were 6 of us in 8 years. We were very close in age. My grandfathers were miners. They were coal miners in Cape Breton. And my dad was a miner and worked for the IOC, the Iron Ore Company of Canada, in Labrador. It shaped me so much growing up in Labrador. I had a very close family. I have a very close family. But I grew up on a street, Howley Avenue, which was full of kids, full of big families. Mostly, all of them were from Newfoundland. And so you got a real sense of community. And Labrador was an amazing place to grow up. There were activities for children all the time. So I grew up playing sports, you know, in local theater, doing all of these things. The advantages are really, when I think back of all the advantages I had growing up in Labrador, I feel so privileged compared to many kids who don't have all these activities that surround them. And so Labrador shaped me because it taught me to be engaged, to get involved, that you get the most out of where you are based on what you put into it. And so it really helped formulate kind of the path that I was going to take for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I bet. I think, yeah, and maybe back to the GlobalNl thing for me anyways, it's a weird thing with community. I think the more you give, in sort of a selfish way, the more you get, you know, like the more you give, like the people want to, you know, we even had a co-op student from the university. We've been, you know, that is helping us do social media, that she's doing a paid internship, but she's learned so much and she's gotten so much from it. She wants to volunteer going forward, you know, and so it's wonderful to see that. But no, that's wonderful. And I think even that for me too, like, you know, growing up in Newfoundland shapes you so much in that sense of community, you know, living in the US for some time, you know, there's, you know, growing up in big city or living in big cities, it doesn't quite have that atmosphere sometimes that you get from the smaller communities or the culture in Labrador and Newfoundland.
And when you grow up, like we grew up poor, well, probably today would be considered poor. Well, of course you didn't know it. But what I find is so funny now, like if I am at a basketball game and I get a t-shirt, I get so excited. like I still get pleasure in the littlest things, the gifts, because when I was young, everything, you know, was so hard to get. You didn't have a lot. And so I feel gratitude for every little thing I get. And I love that is part of who I am. You know, that kind of, you know, like a t-shirt can make me, a face mask as a gift. I get so excited.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes I think maybe my generation or us, I'm guilty of being big consumers, you know, but you see that like my in-laws or my great grandparents grew up in a very small community, and they were the same way. They wasted absolutely nothing, you know, and it was incredible to watch them survive in such a small community. But they were so happy, you know, playing cards and being in the community was the most important thing. And shopping on Amazon was not a priority or even a thing then, you know. But I agree. But they lived amazing, you know, engaging, interesting lives, you know. So maybe shifting gears a little bit to your current role. I know you were the president of the University of Regina prior to this. I'm curious to know, I don't know how the process of applying for a job like this is, but I'm curious to know maybe what motivated you to either express interest or obviously finally accept the position that you're currently in.
Well, so it's really interesting, Greg. I was at a point in my career, I was 11 years at the president of University of Regina. And so, you know, I knew I had 4 more years and then I would be stepping down as president. And I did feel like I still had lots of energy, and I was kind of thinking about a new challenge. And I got a call from a colleague of mine, Gary Bradshaw, who was at MUN. He was at the Marine Institute. And he said, I had worked with him at the University of Prince Edward Island. He said to me, Vianne, I want you to apply for this job. And I laughed and chatted, and we had a great chat. And then a couple months later, he called me again and said, the job ad's out. I hope you're going to look at it. And we had a wonderful chat. And I really hadn't I was mulling it over, but I hadn't made a decision. And unfortunately, right after that call, he had a heart attack. And he he did pass away. And it really had a big impact on me. And I thought about it, and then the headhunter called me, and I put my application in, and it was the best thing I ever did. It was like he knew that it would be the best thing for me to do. So I applied to Memorial and was fortunate enough to get this fabulous opportunity and come home. And I'll tell you, every day I am grateful for being here. You know, I'll walk down the street and I run into someone I grew up with in Labrador City, or I hear that fabulous Newfoundland music, or a neighbor comes over with fresh bagels, and you know you're home, you know. So the reason I was ready for a challenge, that was one of the reasons I applied. I wanted to come home. That opportunity is there, but I will credit my colleague Gary Bradshaw with getting me here, because he was so convincing and charming and encouraging, and every time I feel the gratitude of being here, I think of him.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And sometimes, that's a good story. And I know sometimes we need a nudge, or sometimes you don't know even what you might want, you know, and sometimes a nudge from a friend or a colleague is helpful in that way.
It is, yeah.
I'm going to skip to a question that's similar. I think I followed your social media. I went back through a lot of your activities. You're a busy woman, that's for sure. But I like the sense I got was that you are making a significant effort to get out into the community, and not just, you know, there was a focus on technology companies, which I'm interested in, which maybe during Technology Week, but there's a very broad spectrum of folks that you're trying to connect with. Can you tell me why that's important to you? And I guess, why is that important to you?
So Greg, you know, Memorial was founded to serve Newfoundland and Labrador. So one of the things that probably is positive about COVID, if there could be anything, is that when things eased up here in Newfoundland at the end of June, I thought, you know, I really have an opportunity here to get out and see the impact Memorial has on the whole province. So my husband drove, and I went to visit every town, small town, large towns, to meet town councils, to meet the mayors, to meet business people, to meet our graduates, to meet our students, to find out what people thought about Memorial. And I drove all the way up to Labrador City, where I grew up, and back down again. And it was so interesting how much I learned that Memorial impacts every nook and cranny of this province. And I do believe that we are a university of the community. So that's why it's important as president to get out into the community. And that's something that I'll be encouraging, and have been encouraging, our deans and our faculty and our staff, that really we serve a whole province. And you can't serve a province unless you know that province and you get out and meet the people in the province. So that is why the community is so important to me. And, you know, I met students, you know, coming from Conn River and coming from, you know, way up in Rigolette in Labrador, and every one of them has a beautiful story, right? Yeah. And has unique challenges. And if we don't know that, then we can't serve them the way we should. So I think knowing your community helps you become a better institution. Yeah,
I can imagine, because I know there's a propensity to be very focused on St. John's or, like, you know, Corner Brook, the major centers, but it is a very dispersed community too. You know, it's probably the most like sparsely populated province in the country, and yeah,
pride.
Yeah.
Oh, every community is so proud of its community. And it was really fun for, you know, to have people show me and talk about their communities. And each one so unique and full of culture, full of music, full of resilience.
What was there any themes from that you took away, you know, from those conversations that have informed kind of what your mandate is maybe for the future? Or was there any themes from those conversations you had?
Well, the biggest consistent thing was pride in place, pride in Newfoundland and Labrador, and pride in Memorial University. That came through over and over again. People, you know, really have this sense of pride in place that I think is unique to this province, right? Newfoundlanders are, I think because of the, you know, hardship they've gone through their lives, they have this resilience that is so unique. You know, when I met a father in St. Anthony who had 3 kids going to Memorial, and was having challenges with the internet. So moved his kids to Corner Brook so they could access the internet to do online remote learning. At a great cost, but so committed to making sure that his kids got the best education possible. And really proud of his children and proud that they were going to Memorial. That was a theme that I felt over and over again.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I mean, it has to be, because I think you're right, because it's the only university, it's kind of co-branded with the province, whether we like it or not, and I think it does create that, the closer tied affinity. And even GlobalNl, to be honest, one thing we are trying to bridge the gap for people that didn't go to the university. It does help capture people that either went away to university or didn't go to university at all. It's an opportunity for us to connect
and
that
I would
broader
tell
community
those
as well.
people, Greg, if you grew up in Newfoundland and Labrador or identify as a Newfoundlander, we are your university, whether you came here or not. We are here for you. So remember that your kids could come here and your grandkids, so we're yours.
Yeah, and I think back to my, the getting to see some of the big American universities up close, like the cost difference between Canadian universities and the U.S. is mind blowing, and I think the thing I'm most grateful for is the how cheap my degree was, basically. A wonderful education, and it served me so well working in different industries and in some of the most competitive companies in the world. I'm so grateful for that, and had no debt to come out of school with, to deal with, and be able to do the co-op program, even be able to make some money as you go through the program is a wonderful way to manage that as well.
Yes, that's right. And it's an inexpensive degree here. What a real quality education.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe moving on to the university itself. So what do you think is the biggest asset Memorial has?
I think it connects to what we talked about earlier. Its connection to the province is a big asset. And I would say the talent that's here, you look at the graduates and what they've accomplished around the world. The Memorial University has talented faculty, committed staff, and we graduate phenomenal students who do amazing things. So I think that's our greatest asset, is our people.
Yeah. And that's also been the inspiring thing. Like myself and Kingsley Gifford is the other founder of GlobalNl. We've kind of become the face of it a little bit. So most people tend to reach out to us directly. And one of the reasons I started the podcast was you get to meet. I was having all these private conversations. We'll say people would message me on LinkedIn, and I'd have these conversations, with Bethany Downer, who's an aspiring astronaut, or, Nathan Young is, won the gold medal in the Youth Olympics, and he's a first-year student. And it is really inspiring to see people doing that, both at home, but also, out in the world, conquering these really interesting things. And it's been really fun to get to have those conversations and start sharing more publicly too. And
the wide array, like from acting, Grenfell campus has a phenomenal theater program. Like Trent McClellan, who, is on This Hour's 22 Minutes, to our, the Marine Institute that, trains mariners, that go all over the world, So there's such breadth and depth here that until you explore every nook and cranny, you're not aware of. And there's so much to brag about. We have to do a better job of that, Greg. All of us together, all of us Newfoundlanders have to get out there and promote Memorial, because it's an amazing institution.
Yeah, I agree. I think Newfoundlanders are a little bit bashful sometimes, or they need to be a little bit more forward in their pride and things like that. I totally agree. Okay, again, maybe on the opposite end of that spectrum, what do you think? I think COVID is an obvious challenge for the university that I think all are going across the country. But what besides COVID-19, what do you think the biggest challenge the university is facing in the next, say, 3 to 4 years?
I think it's the same challenge our province is facing. It's an economic challenge, Yeah. The fiscal reality of Newfoundland and Labrador is one that I'm concerned about, and Memorial is connected to that. We want a strong economic healthy province, and we're an economic driver for the province. So that's going to be our challenge, is to help post-pandemic recovery and really help take Newfoundland to a different level economically.
Yeah. And I like, that is the thing I worry about most. You know, even when I interviewed Nathan Young a couple of episodes ago, so he's a high school graduate going into first year university, and I asked him what he was most worried about. And it was like the financial situation of the province, which is interesting for someone of his age to be thinking. You know, it's his.
Yeah.
It's good and bad. Like, it's good that he's aware of it, but he kind of sees it as, you know, his generation's going to have to foot the bill in many ways for some of the previous decisions or circumstances.
Yeah.
But I do see
there's so many resources here. There's so much to be proud of, and there's so much to build on. There's a lot of people's shoulders we can stand on to take us to a different economic level.
Yeah, and the previous episode I interviewed Andrew Fury, and we had just prior to him becoming the premier. But we talked about the same thing, that, you know, just because we've had a hard past does not mean we have to have a challenging future. You know, it's going to take a lot of work, but good decisions, and it's not a deterministic future, good or bad. You know, and if we work hard and as expats or, you know, people in the province, the future can be different. You know, and he was very optimistic about that, which you know, was a good thing to hear.
And I'm optimistic too. I'm really optimistic.
How, I guess, tied to that, because I asked, you know, a series of people that, you know, friends questions, and they asked, you know, how is there certain things that the university can do to educate people to maybe meet those challenges? Do you know what I mean? Is there things that the university can do other in their curriculum or other things to kind of tailor to some of those needs?
Well, I think we are doing a lot of things around entrepreneurship in particular. We have the Genesis Center, and I think you saw me interview a few of our graduates of the Genesis Center, and they, you know, we've had tremendous success from that. But we also have a whole student entrepreneurship program. Our connection to industry, our connection to the field, like our doctors and our nurses and our teachers and our social workers who have such an impact on community. I think, you know, we have a lot to offer, and I think we're doing a lot to help in terms of the economic situation in this province. When I look at the millions and millions of research money that we bring into the province, that hire research assistants, that bring in graduate students, I also think on immigration. We are critical to immigration into the province. You know, we have 19% of our student population's international, and they want to stay. They want to be part of Newfoundland and Labrador. And many of them are entrepreneurial thinking and creative and amazing. So I think there's a ton of things we can do, and I think there's lots of things we're doing.
Yeah, the entrepreneurship thing is something I'm quite interested in. I think diversifying the economy is so important, and entrepreneurship is such a big part of that. And it doesn't have to be, you know, software specifically, but I know there's medical initiatives. There's all kinds of things that can bring opportunity. And that was the other thing that came up a few times about how the university can help with immigration, because we've certainly had out-migration has been a challenge for a long time. But encouraging, you know, folks to come from other countries is such an important, or from other provinces for that matter, to create exactly, and to create a more balanced flow of people coming in and out, you know, opposed to just a one-directional one. And I think, like, one other story, the Joe Teo, who's the CEO of Hey Orca, and I think he's a business school graduate, and he immigrated from Malaysia and thought that he would just kind of do his business degree and then go back home, but decided to start this business and has grown it quite a bit, you know, to employ maybe 30 or 40 people in the province. So it's wonderful to see stories like his as well.
Yeah, the Verifin, who has hundreds of employees, a computer science graduate, and then all of these companies that are a lot in the tech field, which are emerging, right?
Yeah, it's really exciting. I support, I'm an advisor for Collab Software, and they were two engineering students. Yeah, and Adam and Jeremy are two wonderful, you know, young men, and they're growing so fast. And I think the exciting thing too, I've seen them compete on like similar to Verifin, competing on really that global stage, you know, from the province. It's wonderful to see. Like, they were, you know, they got into this Y Combinator, which is the biggest startup school in the world. And, you know, they've got investors from Silicon Valley, and There's a lot of, but all of that money and talent is kind of flowing there, which is wonderful.
Yeah, well,
And
that's what I find exciting. Yeah.
yeah, and they had plenty of opportunities to do something else, right? But they chose to do that, which is wonderful. This is maybe like a little bit tangential to that. Is there any, like, there's always an interesting model making sure that the education matches the needs of like what's the labor needs in general more broadly. And like I was like, you hear Germany being used as this example of, they start their like career paths maybe almost in early in high school, I think, and they have a much more like closer track to, much more for maybe like trades and those kind of things. Like there's a much like a different path to those occupations. But I'm curious to know if you think there's either going deeper into the education system into high school to start to. I think about why I chose why I became an engineer. Mostly it's because like my dad was an engineer, my brother-in-law was an engineer, and but I wonder if you think there's changes that can make sure that the university is kind of meeting the actual needs, and if there's any changes that need to happen there.
Well, a university needs to prepare career-ready people, right? And I would hate to see the creativity that Canadian universities have be lost by putting students on certain paths too early. Like when I mean, my path, my plan was not to become a president of a university. I mean, I did an English degree and a psychology degree, and I think that benefited me and allowed me to be creative and explore different things. And then my path emerged. And I look at the creativity we have at Memorial in the music and the arts, and I want, and the theater, and I want that to be part of it is part of our culture here. So the key, I think, to universities is to make sure that our students have the skill set to explore different options in their careers. So that means we want them to be inquisitive. We want them to be problem solvers. We want them to be able to work as a team. We want them to be disruptors at times and think outside of the box, and all of those things. And those are the skills employers are looking for. So if we can make sure no matter what degree our students take or what path they take, that we have those skills, that they are attributes, almost more attributes that we foster. That, many of our students may do 3 or 4 degrees. My son-in-law's brother, started in, as an engineer, went into pharmacy, and now is a medical doctor, right? Like, and he's still a young man. So, and he's from Northern Ireland. So, this is what he explored till he found his path. And I believe that background he has in science or in pharmacy is definitely going to help him be a better doctor. So I'm not so worried about career streaming our students. I'm more interested in getting our students career ready.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because something else I talked to a friend with the other day was, the job market in general is changing so much. And so like, even if you say get a narrow set of skills or something, really it's like the critical thing. I don't know if at least when going to university tends to teach you how to critically think, and then you can do almost anything, and I think the world is just changing so fast in many fields that being able to critically think and be adaptive and continuing to learn much beyond university is probably the most important skill, opposed to having like, I think about very few skills I learned specifically in engineering school I still use, right? But
that's right.
A lot of the frameworks and problem solving skills and things like that, you absolutely still use.
And teamwork. And Greg, now when I look at our young people, and so many with anxiety and mental health issues, one of the things we have to do is help build resiliency in our students, help our students face challenges, and help them fail so that they know how to pick themselves up and continue on a path, right? To build that resiliency. That's something that, I know as a mom of your generation, we probably protected our kids too much, so they didn't get that exposure that we had as kids, to more challenges and learning how to survive when things are tough, the character that you need to build up.
Yeah, I think that's true. And maybe getting a little bit older, and we've got a little 2-year-old now. You start to see the world in a little bit of a different light, and maybe with COVID and some other challenges my family's gone through. Life is hard, and protecting you from from the perils of life may be helpful in the short term, but no one gets out of kind of life unscathed, and you need to be prepared for that, right? When
Yeah.
Mike Tyson has this quote, like, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face, and sometimes maybe that's a gruesome thing, but it's, life can knock you off balance, and being able to deal with that and recover from that is a really important thing, because it's going to happen, multiple times in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think even my personal experience changing careers, I spent 10 years in the oil and gas industry, and I learned a lot. I still use a lot of the skills that I developed there, but you basically leave a lot of like the network and people you knew, and a lot of the specific knowledge behind. And it was like starting over again after 10 years. And, I've been through that transition for 4 years, but it's still ongoing, and it's hard and difficult. You're kind of it's like being a student again, and it's exciting, but it's stressful and challenging at the same time.
Yeah, I've lived in 7 provinces, and you know what? I still find the moves challenging, and I still find the learning tough. And when I get to learn something new and figure out something, I'm always happy and proud, and
Yeah.
it helps. So yeah.
It is kind of a muscle, I think, that you get used to, and it's going to be hard. We just moved houses like a week ago, and it's going to be hard, but it's worth it, And I think when you get out the other side of a new moving cities or moving, jobs or something like that, when you come out the other side, you're a little bit of a different person. You've grown, or you've overcome a new challenge, and that it kind of can become addictive if you think about it in a positive way. You're always looking for growth in some way, I think.
Well, I love the term when you said it's like a muscle, right? That you stretch, and you tear sometimes, and then you heal, and you build, and it becomes stronger.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
I guess on COVID-19 specifically, how do you think it's going to change the university, like permanently? We'll say, what permanent effects do you think that this will have on the way you educate or do research?
So I think for many of our professors, it will have a big impact on their pedagogy, how they teach. I think you'll see professors much more comfortable integrating technology into teaching, doing more hybrid courses with online options. I think it will change the way we do meetings. I think we'll see more meetings from now on go, some people in person and some people virtually, be much more common. I think students will still want that face-to-face. There'll be an urge to get into a classroom with a professor, to learn with their peers. I mean, I hear every day how much they miss that. So I don't think universities are obsolete by any means. I think after post-COVID, we'll see still our students come, but I think our professors will be more flexible around students learning. And if they can't make a class, can they Zoom in and follow along? So there'll be a lot more flexibility. All of this, I hope, will be an outcome of we've got to look for those nuggets of positiveness out of a hard situation. And I see how creative our professors are in teaching, and it was a stark reality check and change, when they went from one day and 3 days later the course was online. And one professor told me, he said, I spent 10 years getting my course to where I wanted, and that was only face to face, and now I'm trying to take that 10 years and convert it to an online experience, and I need 10 years to do it well, but I'm doing a good job anyway. So I think professors have learned so much about themselves and their teaching styles and the benefits of technology and all the attributes of technology. That will stay post-COVID.
Yeah, I think sometimes a crisis can be a force, an agent for change, and
Yes,
going back to that comfort, we all can tend to get in our comfort zone, and events like this can create discomfort, but it can create positive change too.
absolutely.
I see the same. I actually had this thing where I thought I wanted to work remote find a job that I could work remote from the mountains or from the beach or something like that. And COVID actually was realized that that's not what I want. You know, I really miss people. You know, we work in a very like open office environment, and I manage a team of 8 people, and you're engaged, you know, all day interpersonally. And I just really miss that. And it's also it's much more difficult to stay connected to people remotely. You know, we've been very effective and we can get things done still, but it's not the motivation or the engagement's not quite the same. And but I do think that hybrid model of maybe working in the office, you know, 2 to 3 days a week, and then working at home for 2 to 3 days a week to get quiet, deep work done. I think would be a wonderful outcome for
Yeah,
most
and I
people.
think that will be a reality. You know, the other thing that's really struck me is how hard this is on our health. I find, you know, I can be in Zoom meetings from 7:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night. And the one after the other, I don't get, you know, I have to force myself to move. So I've got a standing desk to help me because I wasn't moving, right? And in my job, always am moving. I go to people's offices for meetings. You know, I walk to a boardroom for meetings. So I was always, rarely was in one spot for even half a day, let alone every day in a week. So I think I learned to appreciate much more physical health and how important it is to move and get around, and how much that's built into our jobs.
Yeah, I agree. I think the
When you
amount
work
of
from home, you don't have it as much.
Yeah, and we actually just moved from an apartment, so we were in an apartment building, and and you know, you spend all day on a computer screen in an apartment with like no access to the outdoors, and it was really mentally draining. You know, we had a 2-year-old, you know, baby, you know, both my wife and I are working, babysitting a 2-year-old, and it was like, and still it continues to be a challenge to manage that. You know, it's not really a long-term setup, we'll say that much.
Absolutely. I'm looking, one of the things I'm looking forward to post-COVID is that actual physically getting out, meeting people, moving around, seeing the campus, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've spent a few days in the office here and just seeing, you know, there, you know, still very few people in there, but just getting to connect with a few people in person, just, it feels differently. You know, you don't feel like you're on this island that you had previously been.
That's right.
I ask everyone this question, and if you could put a message on a billboard, it will say a metaphorical billboard, what would it say and where would you put it?
That is I thought about that question and I actually didn't formulate an answer, so I'm going to go on the fly here and
That's
think.
okay.
If I could put a message on a billboard, what would it say and where would I put it? If I could put a message, I would say, surround yourself with people who lift you up. That would be the message I would put. And I would put it everywhere. I would put it in airports and malls, on the highway. That's a piece of advice my mother gave me. She said, surround yourself with people who lift you up, because in life you're going to meet so many people who pull you down. And that is the one piece of advice that I've taken to heart. And I've been fortunate that I've been able to have so many people who have helped. Sometimes they have to hold me up, but they definitely lift me up. And that's a message I would get out there.
Yeah, I love that, because I heard someone else give that advice recently, and they said for most of their life, they thought they were an independent thinker and they could really just say, no, I kind of think for myself, even if there's negative people around, like it doesn't bother me. But it's just not true. It's like, if you have negative people in your life, you are influenced by their opinions or their attitudes. And it's really, and the opposite, when you are around positive people, it's infectious. You know, you can't avoid it. And that's what the GlobalNl for me has been. It's like this energy source, you know, not the opposite. It doesn't drain my batteries. I often don't have enough time to do everything, but it's not from a lack of energy or enthusiasm that you get especially from the volunteer community, that people just want to do this, you know, and it's wonderful.
And you get so much out of what you put in, and that almost circles us. We circle back to the beginning of our conversation about, you know, growing up in Labrador, how much I got out of that community, but I also gave, like I played all the sports. I did everything I could. I left the house early in the morning and came home late at night, and I was doing stuff, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
you're right, that energy, that to me has been so important, to get that positive energy from people.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that message. That's good. Okay, the last question I have maybe is more advice or feedback we're looking for. So how do you think, so GlobalNL and the Memorial University Alumni Association are about to come out with kind of this public partnership that I'm really excited about. But how do you think GlobalNL or the expat community can help more? What do you think we can do to add the most value?
I encourage you to, be on Memorial's Facebook, to follow all of the wonderful things that are going on and to talk about it. I mean, to build a reputation of an institution or a province it's not done by one person like the premier or the president of the university. It is done by a community of people who all together can speak positively about what's going on. So I would ask GlobalNL and the expat community to stay engaged, follow what we're doing, and put a message out there about the good things that are happening in Newfoundland, Labrador, and at Memorial. And I think the thing that has been out there is our fiscal challenges, but there's so much more that's going on that's positive that I see every single day. I mean, I've worked really hard with the Memorial community to say, okay, I know things are tough fiscally. I don't want to hear what you can't do. I want to hear what we can do. And in trying to build a sense of momentum and hunger and aspirations, despite the fiscal challenges. So the expat community and GlobalNL, if you follow even just the Memorial Facebook, you will see all the amazing things that your friends and colleagues are doing. And I'd love you to help celebrate that and help communicate that to others.
Yeah, I think another guest actually suggests that telling stories might be the most important thing we can do, or even sharing stories, and whether it's from your Facebook group or things like that, but sharing stories can provide the most value, of people's struggles or people's successes. I think it just gives you a window into someone else's world, which I think can help inspire people.
Yeah, absolutely. Telling, and Newfoundlanders are good storytellers, Greg.
Oh, absolutely.
They know how to tell a story.
They can spin a good yarn. That's absolutely sure.
That's right.
Okay, that's all the questions I had for you. Anything you want to add before we clue up? If not, we can wrap things up.
So I'll say to the GlobalNL expat community, I hope when you come home, you take a chance to drop in Memorial and see what we're up to. And thank you for being connected to the province and to the university. We definitely care about you. And as I said earlier, no matter if you went to university or not, if you identify with Newfoundland, we are your university.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I want to thank Dr. Timmons for her time today, and look forward to sharing more episodes like this in the near future. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you, Greg.
I want to thank you for listening to this week's episode of Uncharted Waters, the podcast brought to you by GlobalNL. A special thank you to my co-host Jeremy Andrews, editor Hi Nim, and producer Frank Smythe. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to sharing more stories about Newfoundlanders and Labradorians doing interesting and amazing things around the world.